creeps, Andy here, and today I wanted to make just a fun little video. I saw somebody doing this on Book Talk, so I don't know like who started this trend or whatever, but basically they made a short video of books that they felt were overhyped, underhyped, and appropriately hyped, and I thought that that was a fun concept, and I thought I could do that here for you today. I'm also curious what books you feel like are over, under, or appropriately hyped, so leave your list down below. This isn't, by the way, a list to like be rude to authors and talk about how much you hate their books, but I feel like even if I talk about a book that I don't like, somebody could find it interesting, and it might be their type of book, and so they might pick it up just based on that, even if it's not a book for me. But as you'll see with these books that I feel like are overhyped, it's not necessarily the author that is the issue, it's just the specific book. But anyways, enough with that. Let's get into it. I'm really excited about this one, particularly the underhyped books. But let's start with overhyped, just because that's what they did. So let me grab them. So the first overhyped book I have is Hannibal by Thomas Harris. The amount of displeasure this book brings me is unparalleled. And that is not to say that I don't like Thomas Harris as a writer. I love Silence of the Lambs. It's one of my favorite books ever written. I also really loved Red Dragon. But man, did Hannibal just take a left-hand turn, and I was not expecting that, especially growing up and watching all of the Hannibal Lecter series movies when I was younger, and then reading the books after the fact. Yeah, this one is not for me, and let me just give you a quick reason why. I wish I could just go and tell you what actually happens in this book, because I think a lot of you would be really, really freaking surprised, but let's just say that Clarice Starling's character doesn't quite make sense. Like, the choices she made doesn't quite make sense to me in this book. You know, you've built a character a certain way, and then this one I feel like she just takes a left-hand turn and does her own thing, and it's very shocking. I also don't like that this book turns Hannibal into more of a person. He's kind of this elusive being where he just shows up and does horrible things, and you can't quite put your finger on him, and that's what makes him so scary. Whereas this book, you see him like shopping and on an airplane and talking to people, and it's just odd, and it kind of demystifies the character a little bit. And also it kind of sets up the prequel, so you get to learn what happens in his past to make him eat people, and it's like, who cares? I don't care that he has a reason for cannibalism, you know what I mean? Like, that again sort of demystifies the whole concept of Hannibal Lecter, because he is this being that nobody can quite understand, and by being like, oh well, you know, this happened in his past, so that's why he's a cannibal, it just really threw me for a loop. I don't like this book. There's some really good things in here. I particularly like, I can't remember the character's name, but he's like the bad guy in the third one, and I do like his character. He's a lot darker in it. He like drinks martinis of children's tears and stuff like that. So not to say that there aren't good things in it. And I don't even know necessarily, like, I don't see a ton of people talking about that book, but I just feel like it was a book that I had to mention because out of the Hannibal series, yeah, that one's the more overhyped book. This one I feel like was overhyped. This one was all over the internet. I saw it a lot. I saw people talk about how creepy it was. I was excited to pick it up. This is Seed by Anya Alborn, and I know that she has other books that people really, really enjoy, particularly Brother, which I haven't read yet. I have been hesitant to pick it up just because I wasn't a huge fan of this book, but I will eventually do so. But I think this one is a little overhyped, I'm not gonna lie. And maybe it's just not my type of book, and that's fair. But it's about this man who came in contact with this demonic entity when he was younger, and now that he's getting older, he's thinking that it might be kind of trying to sneak its way back into his life. He has a wife and 2 kids. My biggest issue with this was like, there were some kind of creepy moments, but my big issue were the characters. They just didn't feel that well fleshed out to me, and they were very, like, especially the wife, very contradictory, didn't make a whole lot of sense as a character, and sometimes that's used as a device in a novel you know, for the writer to get something across, but it didn't really seem like that to me. It just seemed like she wasn't a character that made a whole lot of sense, and it was more infuriating than entertaining because of that. Yeah, I don't know. I'm really curious if you guys have read this book, what you think about it, because it just, yeah, it wasn't for me. The ending was really cool. I liked the story, like the storyline is cool, but the characters just kind of ruined it for me. I didn't like any of the characters particularly, and so it's kind of hard when you're going into this. You're supposed to feel bad for them, but I just didn't feel bad because yeah, they just kind of irritated me above anything. So yeah, I'm really curious what you guys would think. But if you guys don't care about character development and you just want kind of like a baseline creepy fun story, then maybe this one is for you. And another one that's overhyped, I'm gonna get so many rude comments, is Shirley Jackson's The Haunting of Hill House. I'm sorry. I apologize. Actually, I'm not sorry. I don't apologize because it just wasn't a book for me. And I know it's popular and I know a bunch of people love it and that's great. And it's about a haunted house and it's like one of the first haunted house stories, you know, written. Well, not one of the first, but when was this guy written? 1959. It's an old one, but it just honestly wasn't for me. It didn't creep me out. It didn't terrify me. It just kind of confused me more than anything. I just didn't get it. It just wasn't for me. Also, I got a comment somebody left a comment telling me that me saying I didn't like a book that was more like in the literary canon was a bad look for me because I have a YouTube channel. I was like, sir, ma'am, it would be a bad look for me if I lied and said a book was good just because it was in the literary canon. That's absurd. I like or don't like books because they do or don't entertain me, not because other people do. That was the most absurd comment. So that person can suck it. But yeah, and this is another one that I would probably get a lot of comments. And yeah, maybe I just don't get it. Maybe I haven't given it enough time. Maybe I need to reread it. And those all could be true. But from where I stand right now, I will say The Haunting of Hill House is overhyped. Sue me! But now let's get on to my favorite category, because these are books that I think are underhyped. And here they are. And this isn't to say that people don't talk about them or that I haven't seen other, you know, horror readers read them, but these I feel like are books that I think deserve a little bit more hype than they've gotten. This is one that I really haven't seen anywhere really. This is called Reviver. This is by Seth Patrick, and this book I honestly just found at my used bookstore. I picked it up, I read it, and the uniqueness of this book is so cool. It's not to say it's the most perfect book ever or the best book I've ever read, but it's so fun. It's about these people who are revivers, and what they do is they revive people who have already passed away to either say goodbye to loved ones, or if they were murdered, who, like the guy, the narrator in our story, the main character in the story, this is what he does. He revives murder victims so that they can say who killed them, and that is used in court to persecute them. It is the coolest concept. And when he's on the job one day, something else comes through the body. Ooh, I'm getting goosebumps. Can you see my goosebumps? Oh, creepy. Ooh, spooky. Yeah, it's a fun book. Anyways, something creepy comes through and he goes on this whole adventure to try to figure out more about the job of revivers and what happens after death and that sort of thing. I thought on a uniqueness scale, this book was so fun. It's also, I believe, part of a trilogy. I have not read the other parts. I've only read this one, but I enjoyed it so much. I really do have to, I'll probably revisit this and I'll probably pick up the other ones eventually, but I thought that this was so cool. Like, this needs to be made into a movie. The next one that I feel like is underhyped is Joyce Carol Oates' Zombie. This book creeped me out, and I don't see a lot of horror readers talking about Joyce Carol Oates, and I don't know if it's maybe because she's an older writer. This was written in '95, but man, is her horror work just fantastic, and this I think is a great place to start if you want to pick her up. This book is so creepy. It's about a boy named Quentin. Honestly, it feels like you're reading his journal, and you even have like little doodles in here as well. And it seems at least, inspired from like a Jeffrey Dahmer character. And so it feels like you're reading the journal of a serial killer, and it is so absolutely disturbing. You have this unreliable narrator who's going around doing horrendous things. You can see other people be uncomfortable by his presence through him, but he's, you know, he doesn't, I don't think, understand how creepy and weird he is, but you'll get this like, oh, she took a step back when I said this, or oh, he kind of gave me a weird look when I said this, because he's so creepy and it's written in such a unique way. I love the crap out of this book and I will forever recommend it to anybody. This, again, it was another one that I just picked up at my used bookstore, read, and fell in love with. I thought it was so fun. The uniqueness of the way that it was written. She doesn't really follow the rules of grammar throughout this book. It, like I said, it really does feel like you're reading the journal of somebody. I love this book so much. It is creepy. It's actually a perfect book to read for October if you guys want to pick that one up. Another one I feel like is underrated is From Below by Darcy Coates. Now this is about the SS Arcadia. It's a ship that vanished, and about 70 or 80 years later, there's a crew who feels like they have figured out where it is. So they are trying to dive and do like a documentary on this shipwreck. You go back and forth from this dive team to the SS Arcadia and you find out why it ended up vanishing, like what happened to the people in the ship. It really freaking creeped me out. The creepy parts in this book are just, I feel like, for me, so unique, so interesting. And I got a comment the other day that was like, wow, when you read all these extreme horror books, like how bad are your nightmares? But those books don't give me nightmares. It's these type of books that do. It's like the books that get into your head that are less intense on the surface, but the more you think about them disturb you. I had dreams for weeks that I was on a sinking ship. For weeks. I'm not joking. This book I feel like is underhyped. I loved every second of this. This is one of my favorite horror books and I still think about it. I think I read it like last year and I still think about it to this day because this book creeped me out. Again, it's not the most perfect book or the best horror book ever written, but it's one of those that I feel like deserves a little bit more love. Next up, my friends, is The Terror by Dan Simmons. Now this is one of the best books ever written, I believe, hands down, bar none. This book is fantastic. This is about the 1845 Franklin expedition to the Arctic, which was actually an expedition that happened, and they don't quite know what happened, but there are documentaries that figured out some things, but a lot of it is still a mystery. So it is historical fiction. And you do get to see, honestly, like the horrendous things that these men had to go through. And there are paranormal things and other aside of other things that coincide with the book, but what makes it creepy, what makes it disturbing, honestly, remove the supernatural stuff. The most disturbing stuff in this book is just what these men actually had to endure. It is one of the most disturbing books I have ever read, just because of that, and I absolutely loved it. Just scurvy and mutiny and death and loss of food. Oh my gosh, what these men went through is absolutely wild. I love this book so much, and that it's another one that I feel like if people have read it, they love it, but I don't know that it's gotten as much love as it deserves, because that is one of the best horror books I've ever read. Another one, this is Tess Gerritsen's The Surgeon. This one I feel like is on the same line as Silence of the Lambs. Like, it's that good, creepy, fun. These are actually the books that the Rizzoli and Isles TV show is based off of. I don't know, I've never seen that. But this book blew me away. I loved it. Again, another one that I just picked up at my used bookstore. You have these detectives that are trying to solve this crime, and it seems like the crimes are a copycat to another killer that was actually killed by one of his victims, and so she gets kind of included in the story. And it's, the man does horrendous things. He kills women, but he also removes their uteruses and keeps them as a little souvenir. Fun. But yeah, a fantastic read. Underhyped, probably because this book is, again, a lot older. I think it was written again in the 90s. Oh no, 2001. Still an older book, but honestly worth the read. If you love Silence of the Lambs, you need to read that book. I promise you. Okay, that was so fun. Now let's get into books that I think are appropriately hyped. I feel like this one might not be the most entertaining because it's just like, yeah, these books are as good as people say they are. So I'm just gonna run through them really quickly. First, we have a Stephen King section because I do think a lot of Stephen King books are appropriately hyped. I know Stephen King's not for everyone, and honestly, a lot of his books aren't for me, but probably most people can recognize how great of a storyteller he is and how almost effortless his books seem, probably because he's been doing it for 300 years. But yeah, I mean, some of his books are just appropriately hyped. Pet Sematary, this book, one of my favorite books ever written, one that I visit, probably the book that I've read most in my life, to be completely honest. It's about a family who moves to a new town. They find this pet cemetery where if you bury something, it comes back to life because the ground is spoiled. It has gone bad. Fantastic book, really like deep in the themes of like guilt and grief and how far you would go after the loss of someone. It's a really great book to read when you are grieving, at least it was for me. Anyway, The Shining by Stephen King. I feel like this book is appropriately hyped. I know that some people have a feeling one way or the other about it because of the movie, but honestly, if you just separate the two and read it as its own entity, because they are almost polar opposites, you know? I've done a whole movie verse book on this if you guys want to watch that video, but truly a fantastic book. The relationship between Jack and Danny is so different from the film. I think there's so much in this book that honestly adds even to the movie to viewing it a time after reading this book. So it's absolutely worth checking out. I think it's one of the best horror books ever written. Another one is Misery. I think this is appropriately obsessed about. This book is fantastic. It is much darker than the movie is, much bloodier, much creepier, a fantastic read when a writer gets abducted by a superfan and horrendous things happen. She holds him captive, but you really feel like the pain and the anguish, and it's just extremely well written. Fantastic book. Another one, again, I know this one's going to be a little controversial, is Tender is the Flesh by Augustina Bastrica. And this book, I feel like you either hate it or love it, and that's totally fine if you guys don't feel like it lives up to the hype, and that's completely okay. But I think just on the level of originality, you kind of have to praise this book. You know, it's not the same story written over and over again, and if you didn't take as much from the story as someone like a reader like me did, that's totally fine. And some people absolutely despise this book, but I think at least on originality, this book deserves, you know, all the hype that it's gotten. It really is a fantastic book. It's about this illness that infects livestock, and so humans aren't able to eat livestock, so instead they start producing humans for meat, for consumption. And it's just, for me, I think a comment on a lot bigger issues. I know that there are comments on like meat, obviously, and like the consumption of meat. That's honestly, like, I know that that's a part of it, but that's not my take on it. Like, that's not what I think the whole book is about. For me, it's a lot deeper than that, probably because I do eat meat myself, so that's just not the lens that I write it through. I think it's more for me a comment on the way humanity treats one another, kind of like overstepping of government and overreach and who you can really believe and things like that. I don't know, it's a fantastic book. I've really enjoyed that one. And another one that I think is appropriately hyped is Paperbacks from Hell. This book is so fun. It's so fun to just go through and look and read about books from the 70s and the 80s, and the fact that they are coming out and republishing a lot of these books, I think is fantastic. And one of you actually left a website name for me of the books that are being published from this, and so I'll leave that linked down below for you guys. There's probably the 15 or 20 books that are already being published from this book, so I'll leave that linked down below in case you guys want to go through and find some books that are a little bit harder to come across from the 70s and 80s. These are books that you've never heard of. As I open to Amityville page. Okay, you get what I'm saying. A lot of these are books that you've never heard of. I just think that it's so cool, and yeah, I mean, what a neat book to have. Okay, I hope this was somewhat entertaining. Please leave a list down below of books that you think are overrated, underrated, and appropriately rated. This was a lot of fun, a fun little exercise in looking through my bookshelves. So thanks for watching, and I will see you soon with, of course, another horror video. Bye, guys.
I got nightmares in my head, I fear that the thoughts build up until I can't hear, that my mind fills up into a creature, and it haunts me somewhere much deeper.